My name is Jennifer Blank, and I go by Jen, and I'm an astrobiologist or a senior scientist at NASA Ames Research Center. Astrobiology is really an umbrella type of field, so almost anything you do can be reframed to be astrobiology. I came at it from a geochemistry background, but I do experiments in the laboratory. I actually have a field site where I study microbial diversity, and I also do simulations on the computer to model simple molecule interactions. In terms of what we discovered, first and foremost, we've found we have this amazing rover that's sort of a combination geologist and roving laboratory, and that everything's working. So better than we hoped and expected. We expected, but better than we hoped. I guess all the equipment's working, and so we've seen more diversity than at any other site we've examined with a rover on Mars. So that's exciting, and we have again, this generation of rover, so it has a stronger sort of a suite of chemical instruments than we've had on other missions. So it's pretty exciting. We want to go to Mount Sharp because we think Mount Sharp exposes up to 200 billion years of Mars history, perhaps including the early history of the planet when we think there were oceans on Mars. So we see from the satellite imagery, and also from the rover, we see lots of evidence of water and water processes on Mars. And here's essentially when we go examine the stratigraphic sequence moving up in time as you go up to the top of the mountain. Although we don't expect to go to the top. It's 5 kilometers. This is really the first designated astrobiology mission. So I think this notion of looking for, NASA's been very careful to say we're not looking for life, we're looking for signs of habitability or clues that will support microbial life or could have supported microbial life in the past. So this would be evidence of water, gases that microbes could eat, all that stuff. But I think this idea of could there have been life on Mars is sort of it's a romantic notion. And if it's real also, wouldn't it be wonderful to show that? Or discover that. That's that potential for discovery. That's, having essentially more instruments to point towards a positive result. Because it's always hard to have a yes-no answer to the question of, is this a clue to life or is this evidence of life? So I don't know whether we'd be able to do that. But we have different instruments that could all sort of support that notion, if we're so lucky. I guess it will depend on what kind of organic compounds that are discovered. So, for example, if they're, tarry materials, we know that that's raining down on Earth and other. It's like dust in the solar system, and that has some macromolecular material. We call it, like I say, tarry, but it's microscopic or submicroscopic. So that's not necessarily a sign of life. That could be debris. I think actually, let's see if I'm answering your question. I think what might be more convincing would be a chemical signature in the rocks that we could argue was preserved over geologic time. So, unless we find an amoeba on the surface, which I think it's a very slim chance. People ask me what I hope to find on Mars, and I say, be careful, because that's very different from what I expect to find. I hope to find little green men, but I'm actually and I also hope, more seriously, I hope to find some sort of biochemical or geochemical evidence that would favor or support the hypothesis that life existed there. Ophiolites, and it's kind of a big word or a heavy word, are essentially just pieces of the ocean floor that have been, through plate tectonics, shoved up on the continent. And in that process, the rock gets very fractured and very altered with water. And now these rocks have been sitting they're in the California Coast Range, and they're on the order of 165 million years old. But water's been percolating through these rocks all that time, mixing with rainwater. And it's created an environment that's essentially picked up some of the chemistry of the rocks and mixed with this other sort of natural and native water and also rainwater. And it's sort of an unusual, not extreme, but a sort of slightly alkaline water. And it has an interesting diversity of microbes. So I'm working with microbiologists and also my background's in geochemistry and trying to model, to just understand the history of the fluids and how long it would take to create these kinds of fluids, and also looking for biochemical signatures. So at the site, in the stream beds, we find cement. It's a calcium magnesium carbonate, and when I first went out to the site, it looked like someone had done a really, really lousy paving job. Just thrown it around all the rocks and mixed it up and went away. And I thought, is that the case? But as I walked along, I saw, no, it's not. And based on the geochemical modeling, that cement shouldn't be there. So investigated further and looked under the microscope at the rocks and found, I think, evidence of what sort of features that look to be microbial. So I think this might be, I'm working to study, see if I can sort of prove definitively that this is actually a biosignature. Because if so, the rock would persist over geologic time. And so we might have an indication of sort of past habitable environments on Earth, or even maybe on another planet. I'm interested in it as an indication of previous climates and habitability. But microbes, we aren't quite sure how they make the cement happen, but do they secrete something and then change the chemistry, the pH around their, the outside of their cell wall, and then allow the precipitate to form? Do they actually secrete it and actually, do they catalyze it that way? Some people have suggested it actually catalyzes on them, on their cell walls, on the outside. We aren't sure. There might be more than one mechanism, but all I can say is that based on everything we know thermodynamically, these things shouldn't be cementing under plain air. So normally when you have sort of a magnesium-rich calcium carbonate, it's at depth at some temperature and pressure. So we find calcite, you see calcite precipitating pretty commonly, but the fact that there's this magnesium means the equilibrium's out of whack. And so trying to understand it further. I think it's pretty cool.